Well, thank you, friends, at AWS reInvent 2023 there in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's Nevada, by the way. It's not Nevada. I have the collateral to prove it. Hey, I'm your host, Kyle Dickinson, a senior security solution architect that focuses on threat detection and incident response. And today, I am here with my friends, Chad and Jazz from Intuit, to talk about their data protection journey in AWS using AWS Backup. So, Chad, go ahead and kick it off.
Yeah, definitely. My name's Chad Haney. I'm the manager of the cloud operations team here at Intuit. Intuit's a financial management. We provide financial management for compliance products, services for individuals and small businesses. Some of our major products that you've probably heard of are TurboTax, Credit Karma, Mint, and Mailchimp. And we're headquartered in Mountain View, California.
And for those that are in North America, tax season is coming around the corner.
Hi, my name is Jaswinder Grover, and I'm senior software engineer on cloud operations team, reporting to Chad. And amongst other things that we do at cloud operations, like we support like a whole bunch of services. My focus has been on data protection and kind of backups and data resiliency.
Now,
Right, man. Yeah.
awesome. So, before we were chatting, and I'm just like, those that want to tell folks like what their journey was and why they started to go down a particular path of using something like AWS Backup or, another, functionality of AWS is because you had a challenge that needed to be solved. And so you had your objectives, right? But I also want to talk about, what were the things that you also had to overcome. So for those that might be where you were at, months ago before you started down this journey of using AWS Backup, they could be like, I'm not alone. I'm safe. We're listening to Kyle, Chad, and Jazz talking about AWS Backup. We're good to go. What were your objectives that you had at first?
I think I will start, Chad. We go back. We come from a setup where there was huge data centers with thousands of machines and petabytes of storage, and then we use.
And I'm sorry, that was petabytes of storage with a P.
Yes,
that is a lot of data.
Yeah, so it's kind of huge, and then we use third-party software which gave us features well suited for that kind of environment. But as we shifted to AWS, the whole thing, the conventional paradigm breaks down at that level, and then the things that we have been using, the conventional technology didn't go that well with AWS in AWS. So all our workloads and all those things, as they got moved, we faced a lot of challenges in terms of, the most important was that the backups were kind of part of each service, and they were not offered as a central thing. So there was no central management, and each service has its own ways to back up. So there was no way for us to kind of offer our customers to do the same thing the way we used to. So, and the setup also kind of split up in form of like we have now hundreds and hundreds of accounts that have now reached to thousands that people had to. So it was the tools that we were using were not scalable. So that's where so our objectives were to kind of standardize, have a system that standardize and you have a simplified baseline protection offered. It should There should be a central way to report, compliance reporting, and and the backup onboarding should be simple.
Yeah,
Right
I think
now,
I think that's what's important to mention is like Jazz said, we have thousands of accounts. That account border is really like the application team's responsibility. They own that. So the backup part of that, right, needs to be owned by that team as well. But we needed a way centrally to make sure they're doing the right thing, right? And so that's where the compliance comes in, making sure the backups are in place. We needed a strategy to be able to still put it in the team's hands to be responsible for, but at the same time understand from a centralized perspective that what needs to happen is happening as part of our compliance.
So you had this strategy. I mean, one of the benefits of being able to use multiple AWS accounts is, from like a security event. That's my background is incident response. So from like incident response, security event management, it is isolating the scope of impact, right? But that also includes, how can you also then scale the controls or, things that you want to offer, such as being able to do backups. Now, I imagine that reporting is very important in your industry. So you want to be able to have provable configuration or provable reports of, hey, we are actually backing up our stuff, or this development team is going rogue, because that's never happened before. With, hey, this hasn't backed up for whatever reasons. It could be a technological error, like a technical error, or it just might not have been configured. What gives? And so you could rectify that before it becomes an issue, and then you realize we didn't have those backups. And that's never the time you want to find that out, right? Is, hey, we need to restore from backups. Great. We don't have them.
Yeah, so true. And yeah, we've written a lot of custom config rules that go throughout, and we deploy to every account that actually monitors to make sure that our backup compliance is in place. And if they aren't doing the right thing, we actually have a system that automatically will JIRA ticket them as well, with SLAs on those JIRA tickets to make sure the backups are being performed. And not only are we checking to make sure that they're using the AWS backup tag that's defined, but we're actually checking for successful backups as well.
Well, that's good. Now, when it came to deploying those custom config rules and such, because we always look at, you want to be able to scale security controls, right? How do you scale those types of guardrails that you have defined through like your directive controls out to your environment?
Yeah, no, I can keep going with this one. So, like, we actually use a product called Cloud Custodians, our policy engine, with a centralized deployer that deploys not only these config rules for AWS backup compliance, but also for all sorts of other compliance stuff, right? And so that deployer makes sure that config rules in every account, every region that we operate in, and is reported into some kind of system that we have called ACP, our automated compliance platform, right? And from there, that's what auditors use to make sure what we're doing is up to par, and also to that automated JIRA ticketing that occurs there to make sure people are aware if they're not under up to compliance.
See, that's awesome. So you're providing that feedback loop as the developers are doing the developing, but if they're not adhering to like what your directives are, right, then they're going to get cut a ticket. At AWS, we have a strong culture of ticketing to provide that feedback loop of things. If you're not doing things within the constraints of what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to get a ticket. That's kind of like speeding down the highway, I suppose. You mentioned something that really triggered a thought in my mind, though. You mentioned a tag, and I'm a huge advocate of the humble tag for resources, because I think that they're so underrated, but they're very powerful. What do you use the tagging for AWS Backup and for the development teams?
Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah. So definitely tagging, as we know, we use it for cost allocations and kind of organization of your resources and a whole bunch of other things. But in our special case, in which is why we use AWS Backup, is for resource assignment. So AWS Backup, the way it works is like we have several artifacts, a whole pattern kind of plans, which is a combination of plans, vaults, and policies kind of all baked into an account. So the user to kind of consume, be able to do that, they don't have to understand the whole kind of, intricacy of AWS Backup. All they have to do is to get onboarded. So that was another thing that we provide the consistent plans and consistent policies. And for users to be able to use those plans, they just assign the tag to the resource, and it kind of, that resource assignment rule kicks in, and it associates that resource to a plan, a policy, and the life cycle as well. So it becomes so much more easier for customers to kind of do that, and it offers us very consistent onboarding.
See, that to me is very important. And, again, strong security background here. If you have a control that you need to have in place, or a directive, but you need a PhD to be able to implement it, the adoption level is going to be next to none. You're going to get a lot of resistance, right? And that's not good for anyone. It's not good for data protection. It's not good for security posture. It's not good for business continuity, right? And so what you have done is you've taken the ownership of becoming the experts of AWS Backup, and then simplified it for the consumers of it to just say, hey, if you need this plan, apply this tag to the resource, and then automation is going to take into effect, and it's going to do the things for you.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
And the plans, they get the benefits of controlling the sprawl. So now we know that the backups don't lie around for endlessly. We know that they are part of a life cycle, a managed life cycle, and customer doesn't have to, I mean, so the user doesn't have to be at all worried about how and everything will fit together, right, Chad?
Yeah, and the plans that we do provide meet our minimum compliance requirements, so they don't have to worry about that either. That's a big thing, right? No matter what they choose, whether the time of day or what type of backup, it's going to meet our minimum security compliance.
Yeah, and then I'm sure you have some sort of requirements for like data lifecycle management too, where you might need to hold on to backups for X amount of days or years. But again, the development teams don't need to worry about that life cycling because you've had that configured for them
Inside the plans, yes.
inside the backup plans.
We do. I mean, some teams have longer retention requirements than other teams, as you may assume, and those teams know their requirements and thus would use the appropriate tag for their requirement. But overall, Intuit has a minimum requirement that everybody needs to meet, and all of our compliance plans meet that.
So, but for them to meet that additional retention requirement, though, they're still just applying the tag. They don't need to go into backup and configure the things, and hopefully they configured it right. They're taking what is consumable by what you two have delivered and team, and just applying that to the resources, so they're able to just get off to the races, so they say, to just do what they do best instead of having to worry about their backup strategy and the planning and then the retentions. And gosh, just thinking about all the things that you just saved them from doing. Give these two a high five next time you see them.
It's definitely simplified things. Yeah.
Now, so are you centralizing, because you have thousands of accounts you mentioned, are you centralizing these backups to kind of air gap them, so to speak, logistically or logically is the term I was looking for, to air gap these logically from the accounts that they're created from?
Yeah, definitely. So initially, before the air gap vaults were kind of made available, we used to have like cross-account copies and all those things. That was like a costly thing. So hence this improvement that came in form of air gap vaults, where you could have where we have a centralized account that's kind of a bunker account, and you follow the 3-2-1 approach, where you have kind of some plans that you offer would kind of offer that option where the copy is being made in this centralized bunker, depending upon again chosen using the tags. You just have to apply the tags, and then the plan would kick off, which will make a copy in the air gap vaults. We have other protections as well for immutability of the backups in terms of vault logs. We put the vaults under compliance mode. Then we have vault access policies controlling it, and then SCPs, right, Chad?
Yeah, immutability is a key here, and all the resources that we deploy in support of this infrastructure, we've made immutable through org SCPs, right? And so people can't disable the features that are needed. And the air gap vaults have really kind of put us into that next step forward. I mean, not that we've had to deal with this, but if and when an account was taken over, what it may be, air gap vaults then would allow us to get that copy into a new account pretty quickly. Whereas before air gap vaults, that vault would be sitting in that local account, and we'd have to figure out how to get it out of that compromised account. And again, we haven't had to deal with that, but the concept of air gap vaults has really got us, to where we want to be in terms of that centralized storage.
That is great. And there's this, I wouldn't say it's an adage, but I heard something that just totally blew my mind 3 years ago from another colleague of mine, and it's just like, backups are great, but if you can't restore from the backups, they're essentially useless. And so when it comes to like recovery drills or business continuity like exercises, how does AWS Backup make that easier for you than you have like with an on-prem solution?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, that is kind of our next journey, like where we are going really next. We have this great monitoring and compliance in place for making sure the backups are in place, but where we really want to go next is making sure that teams are actually performing those restores to the extent that they are trusted. And what I mean by that is, yeah, you can, just because you did a restore doesn't mean it's going to actually work in production. So some of our most advanced teams, what they should be doing is actually failing over to that restored data in production, after a restore occurs to test it out. And so coming into play with our automated compliance system is figuring out how to make sure that's happening, how to test for that. We have these things called game days that we perform for multi-region availability and everything else. And so baking in this restore paved road is what we're trying to call it into these game day tests and compliance requirements is kind of where we're heading today.
That is awesome. I would, whenever that is done, I'd love to hear back from the two of you to hear how that has gone, just so, lessons learned that we could share to the community, especially at the scale. And I mean, you're dealing with petabytes of data. I mean, there's not many organizations I know that deal with petabytes of data. So if you figured it out for petabytes and you're doing it great, everyone could benefit, right? It's all about, being, contributing back. And so I'd love to have you guys back on to hear about how those went and your challenges and lessons learned. Because again, we do things and endure the pain sometimes, so others don't have to, right?
Yeah, and I would just like to add that all that restore automation or testing and game days and all those things, they kind of tee off the most basic requirement is having a standardized set of underlying resources to work off. So initially, and that's where AWS backups come into really handy, is that it gives you a single interface into any kind of resource that is currently protectable and that we can back up. So it's a consistent interface and consistent access to the compliance data that's coming in a consistent form, which forms the basis. And that's what is AWS backup really kind of giving that edge in terms of other third-party software or other tooling that we have developed.
Yeah,
Awesome.
standardization is the key there, and we've done basically standardized a lot of this we own also the account creation process at Intuit, right? The whole life cycle of the account, and part of what it is hydrating it with stack sets that are immutable, deploy these vaults and everything else, and so we know for a fact that everything that's needed to accomplish AWS backups in every account, and stack sets has really been a nice feature, not for just AWS backup, but for a lot of things that we deploy into accounts.
Oh, especially with all the other customizations that you might want to deploy. As someone that was that security arm of account deployment and having to build out all the controls and then do QA on them without an automated fashion, account delivery could have been like a week, depending on how many accounts were being requested, especially when there was like a spike of adoption of moving over to AWS. This was prior to my AWS days. So I feel you with using stack sets and how awesome those are, especially with the account lifecycle and being responsible for that too, because you don't want to be barriers of adoption of innovation either.
So true.
Yeah. Now, are there any other pieces of where you might be going in the next 6 months for your data protection journey? I'm assuming you're cryptic everything, so that would be kind of, surprising. I'm kidding.
No, I mean, it's just expanding the use of the air gap vault feature. It's something that we really are going with. And again, what the restore paved road that I mentioned earlier is kind of where we're going to be going with this. I mean, vaults in itself it really got us to that next place that we wanted to be in terms of immutability of our data. I mean, that has been a game changer. It's always been a concern. Any kind of account takeover, like how can we make sure that this data is protected? And I mean,
Yeah.
vaults are really that. So we're continuing that journey, and truly. Fully adopting AWS Backup is still what we're working on at Intuit. Migrating a lot of these teams from their automated service backups to AWS Backup. We're pretty far along that journey, and the main reason, to be honest with you, why we want to do it is the vault feature and guaranteeing that teams are using those vaults with the tags and the plans that we offer. So. Yep.
Too cool. Well,
And
Chad,
we really want to enhance
sorry, Jazz,
our
go ahead.
yeah. And we just one point that I wanted to add in like future. Yeah, we do really are looking forward to kind of enhance. Right now, we use Security Hub and to integrate with our compliance software. So we are really looking forward to kind of using audit backup audit manager and the rules that and the framework that it offers to kind of make it more seamless and more kind of a richer reporting and compliance control on the backups.
Yeah, that's a great call out. So then we don't have to deploy all of our custom config rules everywhere. We can then again rely on a native service that can give us that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Chad, Jazz, thank you so much for joining me today. And my friends that are at AWS reInvent there in Las Vegas, Nevada, it is back to you, friends.